I'm the executive director here at Three Dots. One of my personal favorite parts of our programming is the gallery. So we're thrilled to welcome Marissa Baez. Marissa is an installation artist, multimodal, and she has put together an amazing show called In Transit. Marissa's background is really incredible, and she can give you some more insight into like where she's lived before and what she's doing now here in State College. I want to also take the opportunity to plug a performance that she's doing in collaboration with some other artists. That's going to be on March 15th. We'll have kind of mingling at 5:30 and the performance at 6. So that's going to be a great opportunity to see a site-specific installation made performatively in collaboration with other artists come together here at Three Dots. But Marissa can tell you all of this and more, and so I would like to have everyone give a warm welcome to Marissa.
Yeah, thank you so much for all being here today. The last time that I've had work in a space, no one was able to see it, so I'm glad y'all are able to experience it and look at my prints. So I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of start off with this piece because it's been on my mind a lot. So this piece is a headpiece I use in my performance. So this wall is pretty much different performances I have done. Soon, that last one will be performance 2 come March 15th. But I do want to give a little bit more context with this in combination with the pie. So this kind of came, it started as like a protest piece. So I was in Fort Worth passing out these information, I guess, pamphlets that I made with QR codes. So it has information to organizations you can donate to and organizations that provide information. So this information is like issues revolving around Mexican-American violence, suppressed history, and then as far as like the donation side, it's like donating to like native, to promote native plant life in Texas. And so with this piece, one thing I also want to kind of talk about too is like the strain with wearing it and call attention to that. So you see this, you're missing some pieces of the picture here. When I put this piece on my head, I usually like wrap my hair around it. So each piece typically has to have, or it doesn't have to have, but it has some sort of like pain attachment to it. And that's one thing I just wanted to mention. And so now I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next piece. And so it's actually right behind me. Yeah. I just kind of, so a lot of these works I would say have different life cycles. And so this started in Germany, in collaboration with an artist, German artist who collected flowers for me. There's kind of like a misinterpretation because I've asked for clay, but she interpreted it as flowers. And so she collected this set of flowers for me. And so I decided to like incorporate it into this piece. It originally started as like this smaller section, but it eventually grew out to be something bigger. So you can see, if you take a closer look, there's some elements that are like exposed of the flowers. And then so it's actually at the front. We're gonna have to walk all the way up there.
Okay,
But
we'll take a journey.
you know,
Take a journey to get
yeah. It's actually the chairs and the pots over here. Now I kind of wanted to end it on these pieces. So I'll just wait till everyone kind of gathers over here. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about these pots life cycle. Originally attached to a much larger piece. I've traveled with them multiple times, like from different states, to finally like get it to where it was glazed. And so now it's come back, and I would say it's getting closer to its final life cycle, but I would say maybe one more left. And then even the chairs they're in their first stage of their first stage. And then this print over here, I kind of want to connect it back to the experience with the German artists. So one thing I did when I was in Germany is I took a couple walks, and I made sure to like try and do these walking exercises to like help clear my mind, as well as like experiment with incorporating the jumpsuit. But one thing I notice along my walks, if you look, I know we're like all crowded and stuff, but right next to it, if you pay attention to those flowers, those are actually native to the Americas. And so that was like my first, I would say first time noticing that what's native here is invasive over there. And so kind of correlating back to this idea revolving around like colonization. And so while each piece is focusing on like life cycles, there's also an aspect to history, decolonization, reconnecting, and sorry, my mind went blank, and ancestry. And so I do reference a lot of like family ties, family connections, and trying to locate the original practices that were kind of passed down. But I'm gonna end it here. So if you have some questions, I'd love to answer them. If you want to talk more one-on-one, we can have a more personal conversation. Yeah.
How do you choose your colors?
How do I choose my colors?
Yes.
So my grandfather was drawn to turquoise a lot. He had this blue truck, I remember. And so that's one thing. I also have this, I feel like I have this connection with water. And so I tend to correlate these two with a meditative state. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your material choices?
Yeah. Like, just in general, or like, is there any specifics you?
Well, I see a lot of like repeating clay, plant matter, wax, and metal. Do those have significance for you?
Yes. Let me. I'll answer your question. Yeah. So I've always been drawn to. This is excluding the metal part, but drawn to more like ephemeral objects and incorporating ephemerality into it. A lot in my earlier years, which I know I'm still young, but like I mean by undergrad, I tend to experiment a lot with ephemerality, and I kind of kept that into my practice because it connects to these ever-changing like cycles involving death. And so I view that as like transformative, and there's always something afterwards.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the hands piece.
Yeah.
This piece. Would you talk a little bit about your creation process for that? And I noticed there's some like red material that's also incorporated.
We can go to it too.
Yeah, let's go to it. Yeah, so I'll start. I'm like ready to like jump on it. we all here? Yes. All right. So I'll start off with this this red texture.
Sure.
So it's actually a polyester fabric, and so that's what's creating. It's like polyester tulle. So it's creating all these like I guess I would see it as serrated marks. And as far as like the hands, as you see, they're like present throughout the show. I see that more as like it kind of relates to how I view my performances in connection to mediumship, in connection to connecting with ancestors. And so I see these forms slowly coming out and becoming physical. And so right now they're reaching out. And so that's how I see they're reaching out to me. And eventually they'll be whole.
Can you speak a little bit more about the content and the context behind the performance on March 15th?
On March 15th? Yeah, all right, well, let's go to the. Yeah. So, I mean, as I mentioned before, each piece has a different life cycle. So this one has existed with handprints around it. What will happen with this piece is I'm going to bring other artists to place their prints. Usually I kind of connect this to forgotten histories or people who have been overlooked, or they come from a group that's overlooked. And so I wanted to be more inclusive and not just focus on my culture, my references, my community. I wanted to open it up and be more broad.
Which piece would you say was like the most emotional one to make, or like the most moving one to make?
I would say it's more of like the performance, the combination. So the headpiece back over there. So I started off at that piece over there. And so doing that performance in Texas, I made sure to go early, but the heat was still pretty hot. And then I had to deal with this metal thing pulling at my hair and then staying still, as well as being like harassed by a rent-a-cop at Sundance Square. I would say that one was pretty emotional.
Can you talk a little more about what you think of as life cycles for each piece? Like, is each exhibition a life cycle, or do the pieces denote some form of life cycle in and of themselves to you? You know, you talked a little bit about how the chairs were in their first iteration. Like, what makes it their second life cycle or third life cycle? Like, how do you start to build around that? And is there a point at which things become degraded to the point where they're either no longer visible, or is it important that through that degradation, through those life cycles, you see the wear and the shift and the damage that happens to them?
So I guess what I would have to say to that is I see it more as like kind of reflective of nature. I tend to like gravitate towards this piece Mark Dion did. He took this tree that fell, he brought it into a space, he created a learning environment out of it, and so it housed moss. And so it was a way to show, I felt like to show and talk about there's more afterwards. And so with each mark and each like wear and tear, I would say it just shows that this piece is still living on, and it just shows more about its journey, like connecting it back, like to the title, In Transit. It shows it's going through these motions.
I'd love to hear about or talk about your gaze in some of the portraits in the performances. Because like on this wall, I feel like your portraits, they're really like inward actions, or you know, you're not like addressing like the camera or an audience. They're kind of like moments of like your own discovery. But like on this one, you're like directly offering us something in a more unsettling way. But then on the back piece, it's like I'd love to hear like what is the thought in that, in your mind in that image, because it's like I'm good. Like you don't have to worry about what I'm doing, but like I'm doing it and it's good.
Yeah, so
But how would you describe it?
I mean, this piece references like something like, personal. So my great aunt Frances, she was a seamstress, and so I promised her when I was younger I'd make this polka dot dress, and I never did that. So I made this jumpsuit in reference to that. But right now I don't have the title up, but the title also gives more context, which is battered. And so referencing her personal situation and referencing how like, intergenerational trauma can affect different people. And so I've been kind of like analyzing and paying attention to these issues of like domestic abuse and how it can like, translate to the next generation. And so I would say that's what kind of sparks that gaze.
Would you say like the translation too is happening from like you promised this dress, but then it became a jumpsuit because that's, you know, how it's kind of now presenting itself, like the trauma, like, you know, it presents differently like through each generation, you know. But is like the jumpsuit becoming the bag, or is the bag another thing?
Yeah. I see it as like endless.
Right.
You know?
And is the baggage? You know, is it this? I feel regret from this. Maybe I'm definitely projecting into this. I apologize. But you know, I feel like there's a sense of like you did it finally, so long after. Like, is there like regret? And then the bag feels. I'm interpreting it as baggage, almost. Something you're carrying.
Any other questions?
Oh, no, I didn't say anything. I was just thinking about what you were saying. I was like reflecting on what you were saying.
I guess, how do you feel looking at these pieces now compared to like when you made them?
I would say relieved. I feel relieved because mainly because of the like attachment to pain, different like forms of pain, maybe like psychological and then physical with some of them. And so to see them on the space, like hanging up, like I've seen this one hanging up, but to see these two, you know, it's like a burden lifted in a way.
When you're doing all these performances, how does it feel to be the artwork? Is that hard for you to step into that space, step into the canvas, so to speak?
It can be hit or miss. It depends on like, I guess the crowd. You know, if I tend to pick up on people's energies, and like if I notice something a bit off, I feel like it does affect how it affect me in some way. But I try to think of it like, to get into that mindset, to get into that mode, I try to think of like my grandfather. So he used to play in a blues band in Texas, and like he he would put these sunglasses on and then he'd turn away from the crowd when he'd get nervous. So, you know, 'cause my mind kind of like tends to go to that. And so it's like separating myself.
Great. Any other questions for Marissa?
Question. We were kind of to build off that question a little bit too. Like, I was, you know, I think our art is in some way usually a representation of ourselves, right? But like, we don't always get to see, at least in Western context, so much of the artist in the work, unless it's performance art, right? So like, and which is performance art, but also when we see it now here in this more static state, like, could you talk about like your decision to put so much of yourself like in the work?
Yeah.
Like, where does that come from?
Yeah, I tend to, I'm gonna bring up my grandfather again.
Yeah.
I tend to kind of think of like his experiences with labor and him being exploited, underpaid. And so kind of like not recreating his experience, but more like trying to navigate this and these effects afterwards. Because it wasn't, you know, not just my grandfather, but my grandmother as well, dealing with issues down in Texas. And so, since it's personal to like ancestry and then family experiences, I feel it's best to put myself rather than another person. And so it would be more like depending on the piece. So like if the piece is more community based, then I could see other people in it. But since these kind of explore specific connections to like grandparents and then practices passed down, I see inserting myself is the better option.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Let's give another round of applause to Marissa. Yeah, it's such thought-provoking and such provocative and kind of emotional work. I have the great pleasure of sitting in this office, and the view outside my window changes every 6 to 8 weeks, and yeah, it's already felt like such a different space to kind of share air with. So thank you for that.